Hello, dear friends. Don't let chaos in the world distract you from finding Christmas spirit. Opinion piece, extremism, conflicts, the middle way, return to the center. Virtue is moderation. Moderation is the key. Collapse of the old energy. Kryon reveals the great shift in 2026. Let's start. Either you go too far or you don't get there, but woe betide you if you go too far, because if you go too far, it's worse, wrote Pedro Muñoz Seca in his work Don Mendo's Revenge, as a critic of excess or mediocrity. Human beings have lost their sense of prudence and balance. They are extreme in their behavior, their emotions, and their belief systems, says Archangel Michael. Extremism serves the establishment. Divide and conquer is their strategy. They finance all sides and support color revolutions. If you want to see the whole show, instead of just the advances, return to the center. That's where you are safe, says Steve Biko. Extremism is the tendency to adopt extreme ideas, especially in politics or religion, and is accompanied by intolerance, fanaticism, and sectarianism. Its antidote is moderation, which implies sanity, common sense, and temperance in words and actions. Don't confuse moderation with lukewarmness, which would be coldness, indifference, and lack of affection. That is the opposite of love. Nor should extremism be confused with radicalism, which seeks profound changes without resorting to violence against others. To be radical means to get to the root of things, but to be extremist means to fall into extremes. This closed-minded stance represents an intransigent position that rejects dialogue and moderation, prioritizing maximalist ends and methods that may include violence to impose beliefs, and is often associated with fanaticism, dogmatism, and the justification of coercion against dissidents. In democracies, it implies the rejection of legal procedures, favoring authoritarianism or totalitarianism. Raising our frequency will make us invisible to those who live in darkness. I know many people who won't believe me when I say this, but what is Ascension if not a vibrational increase such that we have behind an environment steeped in violence and hatred? It's like changing the channel on television. We have countless options, but we raise our frequency and tune into the high-end channels. Those who reject Ascension will continue with their normal lives on a similar planet. Virtue. The Greek saying that virtue lies in the middle ground comes from Aristotle in his Nicomachean Ethics, where he explains that every normal virtue is a relative balance between two vicious extremes, one of excess and the other of deficiency. For example, courage lies between the deficiency of cowardice and the excess of recklessness, determined by practical reason to act correctly in each situation. The Buddha's middle way is a central teaching of Buddhism, discovered by Siddhartha Gautama after rejecting the extremes of indulgent sensory pleasures and extreme austerities he practiced for years. It represents the balanced practice of wisdom, morality, and meditation as the Noble Eightfold Path to reach nirvana without falling into dualism. Both concepts promote moderation as key virtue to happiness, comparing the Aristotelian mean to the Buddhist rejection of extremes. However, Aristotle views it as a rational habit relative to the individual, while the Buddha sees it as a dynamic spiritual path to transcend suffering and delusions. Reset News. The defense of individual freedom is rarely had in political debate. An 80-year-old man could regress 50 years in a hospital bed, according to Mr. Whiplash. Plasmoid sightings increase as solar activity powers Earth. Kryon reveals the grey shift of 2026, aligned with the precession of the equinoxes. The shift is not an apocalypse, but the collapse of the old energy revealed by a brighter light, generating global chaos with intense emotions and the battle between light and darkness. Humanity will ascend through coherent consciousness, compassion, and the unified field, releasing victimhood mites for a major civilization free of dogma. The Veil thinks, activating intuition. 2025 ushered in new beginnings, with gradual relief and the promise of technologies such as perpetual electricity, water desalination, and the ends of wars. Africa could lead a continental awakening. The list have been unblocked, according to Christopher Dollier Reeve. For years, they operated in the shadows, believing themselves untouchable, but the quantum network never forgets. Every transaction, every order, and every secret transmission has been recorded, and now the files have been opened. These are no longer politicians. They are defendants. Their bank accounts are frozen, their communication lines are seized, and their movements are tracked by special forces. New tribunals are operating in secret, while the world looks the other way. All the names are linked to financial crimes, human trafficking networks, and espionage charges. They thought they could hide behind foundations, banks, and charities. The world will recognize their faces and hear their voices. Nothing can stop what is already underway. Europe. 1,872 tractors enter London to protest. Italy is paralyzed and the media isn't reporting on it. Maria Corina Machado greeted her supporters after arriving in Oslo. Macron threatens China with European tariffs in the style of the US. The EU is registering its worst living standards indicators in over 40 years. Elon Musk claims that European commissioners are responsible for the mother of Europe. EU countries are urging Brussels to launch an ambitious banking reform. Denmark follows in Australia's footsteps and plans to ban social media for children. Iceland announces it will not participate in Eurovision 2026, joining Spain, the Netherlands, Ireland, and Slovenia. Baroness Longfield will investigate child abductions in the UK. The EU is preparing to extend the phase-out of the combustion engine beyond 2035, but only for plug-in hybrids. The EU is preparing to extend the end, and this is a repetition, excuse me. Spain. Congress suspends Ábalos as a member of parliament and denies its request to vote. The Supreme Court sends former Minister Ábalos and Coldo García to trial and keeps them in prison. The Civil Guard arrests former PSOE member Leire Díaz for alleged irregularities in public contracts. The government will protect landlords against non-payment of rent by tenants under 35 and vulnerable families. Andalusia activates €547 million for the employment of more than 160,000 people with disabilities. The IBEX 35 diverged from Europe with slight gains and reaches new highs. Spaniards have tripled their net financial wealth since 2010, but fear is paralyzing their money in deposits and low-risk funds. But this is macroeconomy, not microeconomy. tax obstacles are leading wealthier foreigners to sneak into Spain as remote workers. Americas. Mexico reports a record number of foreign visitors. Saving is a luxury for most Mexicans. The Mexican government receives more than a quarter of its revenue from customs. Mexico's tariff on the Asian market aim to strengthen its domestic industry. Former Bolivian President Luis Arce arrested for alleged corruption. Lima's governor sentenced to nearly 10 years in prison for embezzlement. Bolivia and Peru resumed their bilateral agenda after years of estrangement. Peru authorizes the entry of U.S. military personnel into its territory. Uruguay is excited about the dream of finding oil. Milei presented the F-16s purchased from Denmark. Milei reaches his second year in office stronger despite the austerity measures, says an expert. 48% of Argentine households have trouble covering their expenses at the end of the month. The new Argentine Congress will debate Milei's labor reform this summer. A majority of Argentinians believe that labor reform is necessary, according to a poll. Brazil's Chamber of Deputies approves reducing the sentence of former President Bolsonaro. Residents of Villa Morcá, Colombia, were astonished to see a rock formation on a mountain site that resembled the face of the Virgin Mary. Locals believe the image formed naturally after fragments of the rock broke off. The apparition went viral earlier this month and has attracted pilgrims and curious visitors. The Venezuelan Supreme Court and National Assembly in exile swore in Edmundo González as President of Venezuela and Maria Corina Machado as Vice President in Oslo. And that's all for today. Thanks a lot, dear friends.